Hi, I'm Karen.
And I'm Elise,
Welcome back to Poodle People.
where we talk about all things poodles.
I'm starting today's episode with a short introduction or reminder about Your Dog Days, the website or app that I just launched. It should be in the Google Store relatively soon, and then there's a longer process for the Apple Store. So as soon as it's uploaded there and available, I'll let you know. In the meantime, you can use that handy little prompt to put the icon on your desktop and use it as if it were a fully functioning app right now. I'm really excited about this project and I'm glad that people are starting to use it. I did make it free until 2027. So if you are a trainer or if you have a group of people or a group of dogs, please take advantage of that and also feel free to give me feedback. I'd love to hear what you think about it. Um, Last week, I added a section for breeders, and I think the idea of digitally writing down the things that I used to write in paper so that I can hand them off more easily and fully to the new owner is something I'm really excited about. Your Dog Days really has so many benefits, and it is a support systems for any kind of trainer, educator, grooming education, all of those things where a person is learning and trying to get better. It's also perfect for the pet parent. You can put all of your information in there, whether you have a puppy, a senior, middle life, all of the things that you do, your veterinary notes, many rich features for all dog lifestyles and spans of life. So please, if you haven't checked it out, please go ahead and do. And now I'm really excited to be moving on to our first guest today, Angela Dinsmoor, who I got to know on social media. I think that her story is really special. She specializes in grooming aging dogs and posts regularly with educational content on both LinkedIn and Instagram. She's probably on Facebook, although that's not how I know her. So Angela Dinsmoor is my guest today, and I hope that you'll enjoy listening to her as much as I enjoyed talking to her. Hi, Angela. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you today.
Me too. I think because I've had an older dog and now have two dogs that are just entering older age, it's really top of mind for me. So I've been following you on social media and find what you do really interesting. So do you want to tell the audience a little bit about your background and, a little bit about your mission and what you really do?
Sure. Well, the mission of Grey Whiskers, I'll start with that and work backwards. The mission of Grey Whiskers is to help as many senior dogs as possible in the country and actually over the world as well. And the people who love them, make caring for them easier in their senior years. So, to that end, I graduated with a degree in gerontology ages and ages ago. And I quickly realized after working in the nursing home industry for a few years that I'd rather work with pets. So I apprenticed under a groomer and became a groomer for dogs of all ages. And I did that for a while. And then I added a certification in massage for rehabilitation for small animals to my list of things that I did. And it was there that I really started talking with pet parents about the struggles they were having with getting their older dogs safely groomed. They were like groomers were turning them away, and the groomers weren't feeling comfortable working with them as they aged. And so I realized that with my background in gerontology and massage, I really had a unique set of skills along with the grooming to be able to help them. So that's when I started Grey Whiskers, and it's been so wonderful to be able to help all the older dogs that I've seen with their grooming challenges specifically, because even dogs with younger at younger ages in the aging process are struggling with some of the groom, even if they're still able to tolerate most of it. But the older the dog gets, the harder that gets for them to tolerate. So it's been really rewarding working with that group and helping make that process easier for them.
Your mission is so close to my heart. I love this. So you are a mobile groomer, right? You don't have a bricks and mortar store you go to people?
I go to people, but I'm actually a house call groomer because the I started out thinking I would do house call for a bit and then maybe get a unit and become a mobile groomer and you have a van. But the more I did that, I started dealing with dogs who had dementia, and they were getting really confused, even if they were just in their cards in a van. So
Mm,
for my purposes, I kept it strictly house call grooming. So that's what I've done over the years.
okay. So let's set up what you consider senior. And what age do you start seeing changes, and in what ways can the owner help a groomer understand what their dog is going through at that moment?
So the first part, let's see, I don't have an arbitrary age that I designate for my purposes. For me, it's really about where that dog is in their health
Hmm.
of the health of their lives. So if the dog is 12 but still doing really well, still taking, a couple mile walks a day and still managing daily life without much change from what the owners tell me when I talk to them, I'll still recommend that they keep up with salon grooming or mobile grooming, whatever their current setup is. But sometimes I see 7-year-old dogs who are struggling with the grooming process because they have mobility changes or they're starting to develop heart disease or other medical problems that make being in the salon too complicated for them medically or too stressful for them, or they're taking too long to recover. So in general, not surprisingly, the larger dogs I tend to see a few years younger than the little teeny dogs. So but for me it's more about wellness than it is about the actual age. And then
Okay.
as far as what owners can help groomers understand and help groomers do their jobs better, I think if I could just encourage communication between the two parties, the groomer talking to the owner about the challenges that they're starting to see. Because a lot of times, what happens is owners will come to me, they'll call me after they've been, I call it fired from the grooming salons, but they'll come to me after they've been told they can't bring their dogs back anymore. And they'll say that they never saw it coming. And I think groomers, we feel kind of obligated because we're the experts. We feel kind of obligated to be like, I can handle all of it. I've got, this is not the owner's problem. It's my problem. I've got to figure out how to manage this dog safely on the table. And he's changing and that's fine, but it's my job to handle that. And I've got to manage those changes in him on my grooming table as he gets older. So they weren't really prepared for the fact that their dog was struggling at the groomer in many cases because the groomer isn't really telling them because they just feel like there's nothing that can be done about it. This dog still needs to be groomed regardless of what's going on with them medically. So if the groomer talks to the owner about what's going on, what the little things are that they're seeing, and then in reverse, if the owner brings the dog in for grooming or the mobile unit shows up and the owner says, hey, since I last saw you, he started having these kinds of medical issues, or we're noticing these changes in his daily routine. And I just wanted to let you know because it may affect his ability to tolerate his groom today. And I think that, maybe not all groomers are going to be able to do this, but communicating about a change in the process for that day is not a bad idea either. If the owner says, look, he may not be able to tolerate this today. Can you do this instead? Or can we just skip this part of it? It creates a dynamic where everybody's got the most information, the latest information, today's information on how the dog is doing. And I think that can really affect the dog's ability to tolerate the groom better and recover from it afterwards. Because it's not just about the groom in that moment on the table. I talk to people whose dogs are going through the recovery process for several weeks after a groom, just because at advanced ages, it's really difficult for them to tolerate a groom like they could when they were 3.
Wow, that's a longer recovery time than I would have thought.
It is.
Um,
I don't
yeah,
think anybody really realizes how much a dog, and I hesitate to say the word suffers because it makes it sound like somebody's doing something wrong. So I think it's difficult for people to comprehend how long it takes a dog to recover from the grooming process.
I also think, from my perspective, poodles are so used to being in a
Sure.
grooming salon and on the table all the time, that I, I know from my experience when I first started being more serious about dogs, I was not training my dogs properly. My first two dogs were just pet dogs, and I didn't train them to be on the table and to enjoy being on the table. And I think that that's something that every breed really should have some awareness of what a dog should be like on a table and how relaxed it should be.
I
Um,
agree.
I think it's not part of our culture to include this in puppy training, unfortunately.
And groomers are better about it. And I think groomers are definitely better about it now than they were when I first
Yes.
started in the industry.
Yeah.
So I really like to work. I don't do much training just because it's not my area of expertise. I'm not very good at it. I'm like fully aware that that is not one of my strengths, but I try to work as much as I can with cooperative training for dogs for grooming. And by the time I get them now, if I was working with dogs of young ages, it would be different. But when you get a
Right.
dog who's 15 and has dementia, there's only so much cooperative
Yeah.
training you can
Yeah. Yeah.
really accomplish, like long term. So I try to make sure that I'm paying really good attention to everybody who's on my table, so that I'm reading their behavior signals and their anxiety, and then I'm responding to it in kind. If I start to see stress escalating, then I'm making choices that remove some of the stress for the dog, do things in a different way so that they can tolerate the process better, even without the ability to like do a formal training session on the table. And I do find that that works really well. It helps a lot. But it's just difficult when you get to working with a dog of that age because there's also ingrained patterns, right? Because if you didn't
Yes.
train your
Yeah.
dogs, and a lot of groomers are still not, and many groomers are training their dogs to work well on the grooming tables. But actually, poodles are one of the first ones that I ever had a conversation with somebody about the expectations for grooming needing to change. I had a
Mm,
14-year-old standard poodle come onto my table when I had been grooming for maybe 3 or 4 years, and they wanted clean feet. And I remember explaining to the owner that I didn't think clean feet was a kind choice for them anymore because the dog
yeah.
was so well trained to the table that he wouldn't lay down for me to clean his feet. So he would just
Uh,
stand there and hold one foot out, and going around a dog who has some mobility challenges at that age was a lot. It was a lot for him on the table.
yeah.
Um,
I I'm not I actually with my older dog Max Lieberman, who died at 15, at the very end, I didn't even bother grooming him. I mean, he needed it
yeah,
desperately. But he also didn't need it because it would have been stressful. And he
right,
was weak enough that he couldn't hold a leg up or anything like that.
right.
But what if anyone's listening and has a young dog, um, get them ready now by teaching them to both lie down on the table and stand on the table because they need both of those skills.
Yes, they need to know it's okay for them to change positions. I think standards are a specific group of dogs who are just, I mean, look at them. They're beautiful and the grooms that we put them in, the coats that we put them in for show and
Yeah.
for competition and
Yeah.
everything, and they're complicated. They have to
Hmm.
know that it's okay for them to change position. Otherwise, they're not going to. They're smart enough to know that this is how the drill goes. So, changing expectations for a young dog in what we set them up to do later lets them know, especially a dog like a poodle who knows that's the drill, like let them know it's okay to make a change.
So when you're grooming an older dog that might have, hip mobility problems, how do you physically support them more or do you change how they get groomed so it's just not as long and arduous? What are some of the modifications you make from what would be considered a typical groom?
I think my changes in the process come from a couple of different angles. One, I allow them to sit and lie down, and I'll actually encourage them to do that if need be. Some dogs, you can gently help them into a sitting and lying down position. A lot of big dogs have hip problems, so they're more comfortable lying down than sitting. So,
Hmm.
encouraging them to lie down, giving them like a lick mat or some sort of treat to focus on while they're lying on the ground if they're not used to the process can help. I do provide support, but often not as much as you might think. I will always worry with advanced senior dogs that they could have undiagnosed belly masses of some kind.
Hmm.
Organ issues. I try not to use belly bands a whole lot unless they're really wide and very soft. And I definitely don't want a dog who's like all of the weight is going on to the belly with a belly band for that reason, because it can compress organs that are perhaps diseased that we don't know about. They don't have a diagnosis for that. So I try to avoid support in that way as much as possible. And I do occasionally work with owners who are present during the process to help be an extra pair of hands. So I'll work on the floor in most
Hmm.
cases for a large dog. And then in those cases, I can actually ask the owners to be the support for a couple of moments. If I need the dog to have a little extra support, then I'm physically capable of providing while also like grooming a foot, for example.
Right.
So it's mainly about letting the dog reposition themselves, lay down if they want to, and then being creative with support. I, use my knee and I use my shoulder underneath the hips, and I do a lot of different like weight bearing changes that I can provide to act as extra support for them too.
Okay. Um, does that ever, are you adding strain to your own body? Because it seems like you could easily try to help too much and end up taking on so much that you're affecting your own back
Yeah,
or
it is.
or
I mean,
whatever.
it is a challenge. I think, working with, I was lucky. I was one of the groomers who was taught to take care of my body when I was learning, taught about ergonomic positioning and, moving the dog around instead of myself, sitting when I was taught grooming to sit so that I could take some strain off my back and everything. When you work with older dogs, that is a challenge. I think one of the things I used to try to do when I worked with dogs of all ages was that I would schedule not too many seniors for one day. That doesn't obviously work in my current business model because everybody's older. But I try to mix it up between scheduling a dog who needs to be on the floor, a dog who can be on a table who's bigger, a dog whose owner can help me, and then a couple of small dogs in a day. It, the thing that really is the hardest on me is little dogs who need to be on the floor. And thankfully, that's
Oh,
rare.
yeah.
But dogs with neurological problems or who panic on tables, sometimes they have to be down on the floor. And that's probably the most challenging for my back of anything.
I see.
And then,
Yeah.
other than that, I've learned to position myself well enough with variety throughout my day to help care for my body.
So I'm kind of looking at your website and your certification and your section on behavior and stress literacy. What are some of the things that you see owners commonly misunderstanding or misattributing in different ways, and
That's a
not
good question.
recognizing that it's either age or pain or both?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think uh, to me, one of the things I hear most is that, we're seeing this behavior, whatever the behavior is, in the dog now that we didn't used to see before. So she's just getting old, or he's just getting old. And then they don't really delve into what is changing for the dog. And oftentimes, I feel like it is pain to correlate your 2 points exactly. A lot of times, a dog is dealing with pain that we don't know because they don't show the pain
Right.
until it's significant enough that they're limping or they're crying or they're snapping at you when you're trying to touch them in a certain part of the body or pick them up or something. And I think the miss is that when we start to see things that don't look right, like my little dog, she's a Beagle Dachshund mix, and we adopted her. She was 12 or 13 when we adopted her, and she's 14 now. So when we first got her, she was really exuberant on the stairs. In fact, she's a little dog, so we had to try to keep her from doing the stairs, and I had to like beat her to the top of the stairs so that I could pick her up and carry her down the stairs. And
Right.
so, that was a struggle that I had because I'm always like, you shouldn't be doing the stairs. You're too small for the stairs. But now I noticed just this morning, in fact, that she's doing more waiting for me at the top of the stairs.
Yeah.
And it's little things like that that start to indicate that your dog is already experiencing changes that you can catalog sooner if you learn to observe more carefully. So, going upstairs, going downstairs, hesitance to jump on the furniture, these things a lot of times get attributed to like a normal part of old age. And I mean, you could actually argue that arthritis and mobility issues are a normal part of old age just because so many dogs have them, but it's not a normal part of the healthy aging process. So I always tell people if you can learn to pay attention to your dog, learn to become an observer. So watch for things like changes in her ability to hear you when you open the cheese bag at the refrigerator
Yeah.
or those sorts of things. Then it looks like behavior change, it looks like stress. Sometimes it can look like stress is reducing. No more, speaking of 4th of July, since we've got that coming up, there's no more fear
Yes.
of fireworks. That's a big one. People are like,
Yeah.
oh, my old dog's not afraid of the fireworks anymore.
You can't
Fantastic.
hear
That
them.
is one of the, right. That is one of the blessings about not being able to hear anymore. That being said, your dog may not be able to hear anymore. So keep this in
Exactly.
mind, like that's a double-edged sword. Like the good news is your dog's not going to panic anymore. The bad news is she's also not going to hear the treat bag when you open it. So
Right.
little things like changes in behavior and increasing stress sometimes is as simple as dementia, changes related to dementia, but that's a whole different, like that's a whole podcast on its own, I think. And so I think, tuning into the things that are changing for your dog, just, you don't even have to run to the vet. In fact, you probably don't run to the vet for every little thing you see, but some things do need a vet visit. But catalog those, like learn to notice them. That's what I mean by become an observer. Learn to notice those things. That's what I do on the grooming table all the time. I see, oh, this dog is all of a sudden not responding to this, like he doesn't hear the clipper turn on behind him if I'm not right there by him while I'm turning it on, or if he can't see it come on. Little things like that
Yeah.
mean changes are there before we really recognize them as a hard stop. He can't see anymore. He ran into the wall, so now I know he can't see anymore. Before we get to that point.
So when you're grooming, either on a table or on a floor, do you have
Mhm.
extra padding to make sure they stay comfortable?
I
Um,
do.
yeah.
Yeah. There are things now, there are products now that they make for groomers to put on tables for traction and impact protection for dogs who are standing. Because tables are in general not slippery, which is a good thing. Grooming tables are not like exam room tables in the veterinary office for. I don't know that all pet owners automatically understand that, but most of our grooming tables are traction based, which is a great start. But for a senior, even in the tub, they really need some sort of impact protection just for their joints, cushioning for the joints. So I always, because I saw so many senior dogs and I was in people's houses and they were easy to clean, I would use yoga mats. So I would just cut yoga mats and like double up a yoga mat and on my table and then clean it when I was done. And then I had
Um,
several I could switch out between clients.
that's actually what I use.
Hmm.
Poodles are on the table for hours at a time.
Yep.
It's a long groom. So
Yeah.
I have a thick yoga mat, and then I have a pad that's at least 2 inches, and then I have not 2 tables, two bath towels that I
Yeah.
switch out as they are getting
Oh,
dry.
perfect.
And I have
Yeah.
at least that. But, my dogs are on there for, up to 4 hours, not
Yeah.
continuously, but they will be
Right.
up there for a long time.
All told. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
a long time.
they definitely
Yeah.
need to be comfortable. And my pet groom's the same. My other dogs that are in short coats, I
Uh-huh.
still have the same setup just so that they're very comfy and they know that the table is nice and welcoming.
Yes. that's the most important thing you can do. The other thing I will say is that tubs tend to be slippery. So I mentioned that briefly
Yes.
earlier, but I think
Yeah,
it warrants maybe another sentence or two.
sure.
Grooming tubs are and house tubs, home tubs are really slippery. That's one thing the grooming industry hasn't really figured out yet. So I always try to make sure it's a good idea to have some sort of padding on the bottom of your tub, even if it's not padding there. It doesn't necessarily have to be padding because they're in and out of the tub in general fast enough that I think groomers are pretty quick with baths. So it's really the just the traction because a dog who's senior dogs, they lose muscle mass as they age. The older they are, the less muscle mass they have, and so something as simple as standing in the tub and keeping your hind legs from splaying out to the sides,
Yes,
we really
so
take that
hard.
for
Yep,
granted because the 3
yep.
year olds and the 8 year olds can still do it, but the 12 year olds and the 15 year olds can't anymore. And so, towels on the bottom of the tub surface or a grate on the bottom of the tub, like one of the non slip, I forget what they call those little mats that go into the tubs. Those kinds of things can be a game changer because a dog who splays his legs out constantly like that in the tub, you're not only is he at risk for injury and fatigue and soreness, you are too because you're having to pick him up every time he splays out like that. So you've got to bend
Mhm.
over and pick him up, and then basically hold him up in some way, shape, or form, whether that's with a support that makes it difficult to move him around in the tub, or whether that's holding him with your own body. So, those kinds of things are really helpful as well.
So tell me a little bit about your certification for aging dogs. We probably have groomers who are going to be listening, so it might be helpful for them to have a little bit of an idea of what you teach and what the curriculum looks like.
Sure. This is the piece of my work that I'm so excited to be able to do. This is what means the most to me of anything that I'm doing. I've been taking care of senior dogs in my community through grooming and other services for years now, but I just can't manage the whole world. Unfortunately, I get people who contact me
Yeah.
every day from other cities and even other countries who are looking for solutions for their senior dogs, and groomers who are looking to be able to learn the skills. So the certification is a series of 6 courses, and they start off. The first course is teaching groomers when it's okay to stop a groom, because I feel like that's the most important piece that we as groomers feel like we're letting ourselves down, we're letting our employers down, and we're letting the clients down if we don't successfully finish a groom. It's a fail. So I'm trying to reset the focus a little bit on doing what's best for the dog on that day. Some dogs show up and they're not in the shape that they were last time you saw them, and they can't tolerate a whole groom. And professional judgment, we're the experts when we see dogs on the table. As groomers, we are the experts, and our professional judgment, if it says that the dog is not safe for a groom that day, we have the ability to call that. We just need to step into that, and we need to accept that it's okay to tell people we can't finish and here's why. The second course deals with, like as you mentioned earlier, behavior and stress literacy. So it's teaching groomers how to read behavior and difficulty on the table sooner. I had a conversation, I'll just throw this in there. I had a conversation the other day with the owner of a salon who, she said she's not actually a groomer, but she said, yeah, our groomers do a really good job of handling senior dogs, and they're really compassionate and they really seem to like the dogs, and they don't tell the clients no just because they get too old. And all of that's fantastic. There are some corporate salons and some other places that put in hard stops for grooming at a certain age. But then in the very next breath, she told me, yeah, we had a standard poodle on the table the other day who had a barking seizure and then pooped on the table. And course 2, the second course in the certification program, is to help groomers avoid getting to that point.
Hmm.
It's the whole purpose is to be able to enable groomers to read stress and behavior, body language sooner, so that they don't have those moments where the dog goes into shutdown mode and they have to
Mm.
stop the groom, and so that they have a course going forward that makes more sense, so that they can manage them more safely next time as well by reading the stress signals sooner. The third course is teaching about the physiological aging process so that groomers understand like what aging actually looks like on an old dog. So that one is just that one's more like learning to recognize aging in a dog and how it affects the grooming process, the modifications they can make to the groom because of what they're seeing in aging changes. And
I
the next
I'm
course
gonna
is go ahead.
I'm going to interrupt you for just a second because
Sure.
you list skin fragility. And
Uh
of
huh.
course, that totally makes sense because as we age, we know that
Right.
our skin becomes more fragile. But I don't know that I had
Right.
ever actually thought about it.
Yeah.
Of course, if I were taking care of an older person in the hospital, I would be so careful with their skin. But I don't know that I've ever internalized that I need to start doing that with dogs as well. So I really love that.
Yes,
Um,
that's one of the things I think we underestimate how the skin changes in senior dogs. They bruise more easily, they burn more easily, the skin tears more easily, just like
yeah.
humans do. So there
Yeah.
are things that we need to be considering as groomers too. With the old, that goes more for like the 16, the 17. I deal with dogs. I've dealt with dogs. The oldest one I saw was 22. So I'm
Wow.
talking like depending on the size of the dog, again, anywhere from like 14 to 20 ish.
Yeah.
Those kinds of changes happen. They're not happening in the 7-year-old dogs in most cases.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So course 4 works on teaching groomers how to recognize pain on the table. A lot of times clients will bring their dogs into the salon or put them in the mobile vans, and you ask them how the dog's doing, and they'll be like, fine, he's not, I ask all the time, is he on pain medicine or does he have any pain on a day-to-day basis? And they'll say, no, the vet doesn't have him on anything, he must be fine. But then I get them on my table and there are very obvious signs of pain, and that's where that 2-week recovery kind of situation comes from,
Hmm.
where maybe the dog's not been diagnosed with pain because either the veterinarian didn't check for it or the owner didn't think to mention something about it. These are still gaps that are happening in vet care for senior dogs right now. But if I can see symptoms and signs of pain on the table, it doesn't even matter what it is. I can't diagnose it. It's not relevant. But if I can see it and make an adjustment to the process for the dog, then I can shorten that recovery window significantly for them and have them not even go through some of those issues. And then the 5th course teaches medical complexity. So I work a lot with dogs who are at the very end of life. So dogs who are, some dogs I see only once or twice because they're euthanized soon after that. But they still need to be groomed because they still need face, feet, and tail done. They still need to be cleaned up so that they can get around safely and go potty safely, and so that the owners can see them and recognize them.
Hmm.
See the face they've always known and loved when they look at their dogs. So I work a lot with dogs of those in those situations. And I think one of the things that groomers can really learn to do that sets them apart from their competitors and the others working in the industry around them is learning to understand the different medical issues that a senior dog is living with all at the same time, and how that affects the dog's ability to tolerate a groom, and then how to adjust the groom accordingly. So, and that's one of the biggest pieces of what I do on a daily basis is I talk to people and I find out what the dog is dealing with, and then I develop a grooming plan that fits that dog's needs on that day. And then the sixth course kind of puts it all together for the certification piece. So that's the capstone where they're learning to like execute all of these things in the everyday grooming that they're doing with their clients.
So I spend a lot of time on social media and LinkedIn and reading research papers, and I see this small group of people who are starting to really take the ownership of this area of senior dogs. And are you seeing the same thing? Are you seeing that people are recognizing that we need, just like puppyhood has its own protocols, and puppyhood is about, pottying and socialization and all of those things. Are you seeing this a growing body of work around senior dogs in the US and other places?
I am, and I'm so excited about it. I did this work in what felt like a vacuum for many years because nobody, and I think the grooming industry is a little behind the curve, and veterinarians are largely behind the curve too. That the group of veterinarians who's out there educating and changing the status quo for how aging looks for senior dogs and how it looks for owners to manage that for their dogs. they're really pushing the needle on that, and I love to see it. So yes, they're getting more vocal, they're getting more visible. I'm hoping that we can draw the same changes in the grooming industry because I feel like um, the grooming industry gets overlooked a lot as it is. I mean, we're groomers are doing amazing work and they're doing incredibly difficult work, and I still have people like randomly. I still had somebody ask me not that long ago. So you just basically like sedate the dogs, right? Like to groom them. That's, you just give them something. You give them a pill or something, and then that way they're easy to
Oh,
groom. And I'm like, no. And I wish people didn't think that. I mean,
yeah,
that's less common. I mean, that particular person may not have been as up to date on all of the things as everybody
right.
else, but the grooming industry is like we're definitely people don't understand how the grooming industry works, and they don't understand how much we love the dogs that we see and how hard we're trying to do the best we can for them. So I'd love to see that change for senior dogs too.
I'm really excited about it. I think one thing that owners should take away from this is that yes, you go see your vet, but your vet may be, um, especially if there's nothing obvious that's wrong, your vet may not notice some things, and your groomer is with your dog for a longer period of time in challenging situations and will have really good feedback. And it's important to remember that the groomer is a critical part of your team in the care of an aging dog. I think it's a
It's
little bit underestimated how strong that partnership is and how it supports what you see as an owner and what your vet sees, and then adding in what the groomer sees.
agreed. And I think that some of these veterinarians who are emerging now as advocates for senior dogs, they're recognizing groomers as sort of a first line of defense and information on these pieces that because many of us have experienced the dog that you take into the vet because there's something clearly wrong with them, and then when you get to the vet the dog is fine, right? Because they mask symptoms because of the
Right.
nerves and the chaos and the challenges of being in a veterinary clinic. And,
Yep.
I've always had dogs like that too. But groomers, especially a groomer who's been working with a dog for many years, they have a great rapport with that dog, and the dog is not nervous of them. And so they're not guarding, they're not masking symptoms. The groomer can see very clearly changes that maybe were more dialed into qualifying or quantifying than the owners are because we work with a vast quantity of dogs where the owner has two
Right.
dogs or something.
Right.
And then if we give that information to the owner, if they take it to the veterinarian, that can be invaluable into sometimes saving lives,
Yes.
back problems and all kinds of changes that we see on the grooming table can be really integral to diagnosis and providing comfort for the senior dog as he's aging, and groomers definitely deserve credit for that skill set.
There's also a really nice thing for groomers. Owners are with their dog every day and they don't notice the small changes, but a groomer might be going, I don't know, every 6 weeks or every 4 weeks
Yeah,
or whatever the time frame is, and they can remember, okay, so the dog was able to hold up its hind leg for longer last time. Now it's really struggling. And in those 6 weeks or whatever it was, they have declined and they can point that out. And it just gives a freshness to the perspective because it is very easy to live with a dog and not see every single
right.
change. You just get habituated and start to think it's normal. And then someone can point out, oh, actually,
Yeah,
maybe it's
it's
not.
very obvious to me many, many times when I go into clients' homes.
Yeah.
Oh, when did he start off waiting that right front leg? Or, when did you notice he wasn't hearing, the doorbell ring anymore? When did he stop
Yeah.
getting up to greet me? He always greets me at the door when I come to see you. And today he's not here. Is that normal for him now? Have you noticed that in the
Right.
past?
Yeah.
Groomers are in a really good situation to notice a lot of those little things because it's so true. It happens with senior people too. That
Hmm.
like day to day minuscule changes that don't scream to you, but when somebody shows up at your door, when you take your dog into the grooming salon, it's very evident.
Well, Angela, it has been just wonderful talking to you today and spreading the word a little bit about your program, your certification. I love this. I think it's a great thing. And I love that there is more recognition of the senior dog and the special care that they need. So I really want to showcase your work, and I hope that people will check out your website. Do you want to share your website, your socials, ways people can follow your work and get in touch?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. It's my website is www.greywhiskers.dog. And I have a newsletter. Basically, I have a newsletter, I have a community, and then the certification. You can find them all right on that greywhiskers.dog. And
Fantastic.
then as far as social goes, it's Grey Whiskers Pet for Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and I think Twitter. That's my social handle is generally Grey Whiskers Pet for everything.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening, and remember, a poodle will change your life. If you're interested in my breeding program or are ready to be added to my waiting list, please visit my website at scotchcornerstandardpoodles.com, where you will find all of the relevant information and links. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of Poodle People. Please remember to like us on your favorite platform, or even better, leave a review. We really appreciate it, and it helps us get new listeners. And if you have any questions you want me or Elise to answer, send us an email at poodlepeoplepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of Poodle People. See you next week.